Welcome to Seth's Daily Podcast. Without you guys, this wouldn't be possible. I want to thank you guys for subscribing. I want to thank everybody that's followed and liked Nighthawk Radio. Everybody give us a follow and give us a like on Nighthawk Radio's Facebook page. Give us a subscription on YouTube, Seth's Daily Podcast. Give us a follow on Spotify, Seth's Daily Podcast, and Seth the Soil Guy on TikTok. Appreciate everybody that's gave us likes, gave us follows. Blessed enough to have an MMA expert, Robert. How you doing, man?
Doing well, my man. How you doing?
I'm doing good, bro. Doing good, man. I'm glad to have you on, man, and talk about one of my favorite sports, MMA.
Yeah, MMA is a complex and simple at the same time.
So what got you into MMA, man?
Well, it's an odd transition, but like I grew up watching wrestling because we didn't in boxing. So you had boxing and you had wrestling, like WWF, which is now WWE. You grew up watching that, and then you had the boxing you would watch. And so being able to do both of those, at the time you thought they were really punching each other in the wrestling stuff. It was really entertaining and interesting. And so as the UFC came along early on, I can remember watching the VHSs with my dad and thinking, man, that was so cool. And then just trying to figure things out on my own, which is probably why I ultimately ended up becoming a coach myself because we didn't have a lot of access to actual technical coaching in the early late '90s. We were all trying to figure it out as we go, and that's kind of what we were talking about before we went on air. Was the growth of technical understanding and complexity of movements and growth happened more in the last 30 years because of the UFC and allowing us to see what works under stress, pressure, and resistance in a real setting with skilled people. The movements and the techniques and the skills that are required to defend yourself or win a fight against someone who's not as skilled, even if they're athletic, is substantially less than what we need when we're talking about two highly skilled athletes who have also technical understanding. And when we talk about athletes, I think that gets lost in that is when we're talking about athletes, we're talking about people that are kinesthetically aware, flexible, fast, strong, cardiovascular in shape, and things like that. So it's not just they have one attribute. Some of these athletes now that's been around longer, we're getting some of these A and B athletes coming to MMA, where most of the time A and B athletes would stay in uh, wrestling, football, basketball, baseball, and MMA was only getting like the C and D athletes or guys who after college had nowhere else to go to chase their physical endeavors or athletic careers. So then they were like, "Well, I'm going to give this a try." Well, now you're getting kids who literally are growing up from the time they're 5, 6, 7, training, and by the time they're 18, they've got 10, 12 years of training. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's definitely awesome though, man. And when you was talking about all that, I thought of one fighter, Kobe Covington, man.
Yeah, yeah. Colby's one of those guys that who also his skill, although was he was winning and doing well competitively in the UFC, there's a marketing side, and that's kind of where it goes back to what I was talking about earlier, where the MMA world is now blending in the entertainment part that kind of wrestling and soap operas or daytime TV things like that, because now if you're marketable, you're drawing more pay-per-view buys, so now financially you're doing better. And although that's good at the professional level, I think the problem with that is we're teaching our amateurs or our young kids coming up, they're selling fights before they have the skills to kind of back that up. And you got to be careful because if you're out and you're promoting and you're selling these fights as an amateur before your skill growth, then you could put yourself in a situation that's probably going to do more damage for your career than positive.
Man. Now, who's your favorite fighter of all time in the UFC?
It was GSP, like GSP, I thought was the most well-rounded. I loved his approach to fighting. He approached it very analytically and sought out the best people in each craft. So he generally wanted to be the best by seeking out the best experts so he could be the best at each one. And I just always respected and admired that.
It's a good choice, man. If only we got to see him fight Connor, that would have been awesome.
Yeah, and that's it's funny. We were watching the fights this weekend, some of us, and we were talking about that. Is we missed out as fans, okay, and I understand all the reasons why most of the time, but as fans, we missed out on some really, really cool super fights over the last 10, 12 years.
Yeah, we've missed out on John Jones fighting Francis
Yeah,
because Francis is in PFL now.
yeah, and I think I heard that he may be coming back to the UFC, but again, you probably we've missed out on that super fight. And I think there was a time that it was pretty wanted for like Anderson Silva and GSP, and then Anderson Silva and John Jones, and they were really inside of time frames where both athletes and both fighters were still viable and in good shape or close to their primes to have made those fights really really exciting. And that's where if MMA had the money that boxing has, I think we'd have had a better shot at getting some of those super fights.
Yeah, John Jones versus Brock Lesnar would have been a good one too.
Yeah, and then again, it goes back to a marketing base. Brock Lesnar has a huge fan following, a huge fan base. So you would have brought in, even when they signed him, he brought in a whole different fan base, which was ultimately beneficial to the company and its expansion and giving more fighters opportunities. So MMA may not have the as large purses as boxing, but you're employing um, more fighters at a higher level that are allowing them the opportunity. So I don't know, I don't know what argument is right on that. I know it's a argument that we had from multiple perspectives. I don't know which one is right or not. I mean, it's hard for me to tell the UFC they're doing it wrong whenever they're so successful and they've employed and gave countless people the opportunities to live their dreams. So not sure I'm in a position to criticize that.
Yeah, I'd like to see PFL versus the UFC. That'd be an awesome pay per view.
Yeah, I remember when they tried to do back when Pride was around. I don't know, I'm probably getting a little bit older now, but when Pride and the UFC were allowing fighters to crisscross there for a little bit, I know the UFC sent a couple fighters to Pride and vice versa, and that was really interesting back then too.
Might be the way we can get Francis versus John Jones, man.
Yeah, yeah, right.
That'd be an amazing fight, dude.
I wonder what do you remember what the pay was that they were asking for? I think right, like Francis wanted X amount, right? Was that right?
Yeah, it's like millions,
Okay, yeah,
but they would have made a killing off that.
yeah, yeah.
That'd
We're
be a super fight for sure, man. Yeah. So, who was your biggest influence in MMA, man?
So the biggest influence was George Gurgel and Rich Franklin, because when I started training with them at the time, they were still actively fighting in the UFC, and I was traveling to Cincinnati, 3 to 4 days a week, so I could because we didn't have as many training facilities or teams around in Kentucky like we do now. We have a lot more options to train. Back in '99 through 2006, seven, you didn't have very many options. So I was traveling up there, and those guys were competing in the UFC, and I just thought it was so cool because they were bringing in guys from the UFC that were training inside of because Professor George had the largest. He had one of those 22,000 square foot super gyms. He was the first one to really have one of those, especially anywhere, but here in the Midwest, especially. So you were getting all these other UFC caliber guys that were coming in and running their camps there and just being exposed to how these high level athletes were running their camps as a coach. It benefited me to come back and incorporate that into my own coaching philosophy to allow me in a smaller market, because we're in a small market. So it's a lot harder for those of us that are in Kentucky, all the other black belts and MMA school owners. It's a lot more difficult for us because we don't have the population to draw from that some of these bigger cities and these larger markets do. Even as large as Lexington and Louisville are, when you compare us to other states, it's not, we're what Kentucky has 4.4 million residents, and that's spread out over, 120, 124 counties. So it's not a highly concentrated area. So, you're pulling from smaller markets, and it's a numbers game. Sometimes it's just like a Class A football team versus a Class 6. The more numbers, the more chances you're going to have for more athletes that are going to be able to have that drive to want to be champions, which is a whole nother mindset and a whole conversation by itself.
Yeah, but it is picking up here in Kentucky for sure.
It is, we have kind of it's like a reemergence of MMA interest. A lot of the promotions, we're getting more fights again. There for a couple of years, it was like the promotions went away. And when the promotions go away, then typically the interest for MMA kind of died down. Now it kind of looks like we're on a back upswing, which is cyclical. Everything is. It goes through cycles, economies and cultures, and everything goes in cycles. MMA is no different. The more events there are, typically the more interest there are, because then there's the more opportunity for people to go out, perform, and have a local and regional way to chase a national, ultimately international goal or dream.
For sure, man. Now, who's a fighter in Kentucky people need to keep an eye on?
Man, there's so many really talented fighters from multiple schools. I know Louisville has a few really tough amateurs and pros out of there. There's I mean, the whole state is filled with a lot of talented fighters coming out. I don't know that there's any one I would pick over the other just to stay out of drama or conflict. um, because I just think I don't want to disrespect some people I might not have seen who are really, really talented. Because when I'm coaching my guys, and that's why like when I go to events, I probably have a look that says that I'm not very approachable or friendly, but I view it when I go there, I'm doing a job, and that job is to be focused on the guys that are trusting me to prepare them for fights. It's not that I dislike other teams or other fighters. It's I have to be focused, and my fighter deserves that focus. It's not about me there going and making friends and hobnobbing with people. So I try and stay focused on our guys and what they have to do, and then whenever we have opponents in front of us, then I spend my time, scouting them and doing all the film study on that. So my scope of the other talented is limited if they're outside of our team's current weight class of fighters.
Yeah. Sorry about that, man. I didn't mean to put you in a tough
Oh
situation with
no,
that
man,
question.
that's the whole thing. It's really it's that's part of it. I mean, I just think there's a lot of really talented guys. I think like I think like core jujitsu and Derby City. I think those guys do amazing jobs. They're led by really good coaches. Um, Philip Perkins has a school in Louisville as well. Um, he runs really really good MMA program. Jiu-Jitsu school does really well. Um, so there's a lot of really talented gyms and schools around the state, which is really good for all of us. It's just so tough because, in these smaller markets, it's tougher to cross train sometimes, like they can in the bigger, like Las Vegas, San Diego, and LA, and even down in Florida. It's a little bit tougher to cross train because your guys are competing against each other for a lot of times for the same local or regional titles. So it's not that you're giving away secrets, but sometimes you want you don't want to take away the discomfort, right? So when people go to fight, it's the fear of the unknown that makes it fearful, right? We don't, it's, I can't predict what's going to happen. When you take away that predictability, then it makes it a lot easier for people to do what they are comfortable doing. So you want to make that process as difficult on everybody as it is your fighter.
Well, actually, here in Kentucky, man, we got one of the best fighters in UFC history. Mighty Mouse is from here.
Yeah, yeah. And Nathan Mann's spent a lot of his time early on. Nathan Mann has spent a lot of his time in Kentucky as well. I think he's in like North Carolina or something like that. Fought in the UFC. Harry Hunsucker fought in the UFC 3, 4 times. And there's a plethora of other guys. And there's guys who have gotten opportunities and maybe didn't accept those opportunities. Kentucky has some really, really good martial artists. And the reason I say martial artists because there's really good jiu-jitsu players here. Gi and no gi. You have some world medalists, you have PANS medalists, you have ADCC medalists. I think people forget like Joe Bays won the ADCC trials, and that was in a time that it was really like there was not near as many training partners for any of us. To do things like that's incredible. I know Nick Albon and Chewy, everybody knows him as Chewy, out of Louisville. He's won Grand Slams. I think he won worlds twice, medaled 3 times, I'm pretty sure. So I mean, there's a lot of really, really good athletes there.
Definitely, man. Kentucky definitely has talent. That's for sure, man.
Yeah, well, you got a black belt in Louisville core, Nathan Haddad. Nathan's, I mean, I think he's the best black belt, the young black belt for our entire state. Phenomenal coach. I see him at tournaments. He's always coaching his kids really hard. Shows up for his adults, even with his own personal competition schedule. He stays really active. He's a young kid who stays really active, a young man who stays really active. I think that's admirable to see someone do that. As someone who's getting older and retiring and leaving out of competition, it's really good to see other coaches leading their students by example. And I think there's always respect for that. Win, lose, or draw, there's a lot of pressure as a coach to go out and compete, because your students, and then not only your students, but maybe your competition, other schools, rivals, they're looking for you to mess up. So they people want to see you be successful until you're successful. And then when you're successful, then they want to decide how long you're allowed to be successful. And then that creates a lot of dislike. I don't like to use the term haters. I don't know that any of us are popular enough to be have haters. I think like Conor McGregor has haters. I think Colby Covington, John Jones, I think those guys have haters. Gordon Ryan, because they're so well known. Some of us in a smaller area and not so famous, we have people who dislike us. A little bit different.
You have people that are jealous of you. I got what you're saying.
Yeah, I think that just kind of naturally happens. Again, it's unfortunate. I don't live that way. I mean, personally, not to sound like some goody two shoe. I never believed somebody else's success was preventing me from doing what I needed to do. When somebody is successful, I like to see other people successful. It's motivating. It's motivating in a good way. It's like, okay, and then especially when you see people who overcome challenges and troubles and adversity, it's like, again, that's inspiring to me.
Definitely, man. Seeing people from our state do good too, like Mighty Mouse. I mean, heck, Mighty
Yeah,
Mouse is one of the best fighters ever, man.
yeah, I do. Especially, like I've traveled to, and I don't know if any of the other black belts or MMA guys experiences. I know when I've gone to other places or tournaments, or like when I go to Worlds or Pans or something like that, and then they ask where you're from. Kentucky always kind of gets like that, like, where's that? Or, oh, I didn't even know they immediately, because we're a smaller market, and for whatever the stereotypes the world has of Kentucky, I think that gets projected on. Well, there's no way there can be high quality MMA or high quality jiu-jitsu there because of its location. And I firmly have always disagreed with that, not just because I'm here. I mean, most of us that coach and run schools in Kentucky could probably go to other states and it's more profitable to do it, because Kentucky is in the lower 16 of health and fitness, meaning we're in the bottom 16 of the states. They don't like to go the exercise is not like a big draw for our state, and that just is what it is. And that's not talking bad, but I think the rest of the country, or even the world that is familiar with Kentucky, looks at it and is like, well, though, because of that lack of interest, there's no way they could be good at something.
You just gotta show them a picture of Mighty Mouse, bro.
Yeah, 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 right. No doubt, no doubt.
Now, is there any upcoming fights you want to talk about then? Like in the local
So
promotions?
they got New Line Cage fighting. He's Keith No. They've been doing a really good job of bringing MMA back to Lexington. Lexington is a tough market because leasing space here for an event is really, really expensive. So it gets really intimidating to for promotions to come here. Hard Rock and BT used to come here on a pretty regular basis, which was great for our team, because when you're an amateur, you're putting a lot of financial strain on these young guys to have to travel 2 or 3 states away to fight. And as the amateurs, there's no prize fighting, so you're not making any money. So it's really tough. And in the rule sets, Kentucky Athletic Commission is awesome, because we run rule sets that are favorable to fighters. I know, like, and I'm not going to talk bad about other states, but there are some states where I'm not going to specify states. Excuse me. The guys are wearing shin guards and headgear 3 fights in, or they're not allowed to throw this technique, or they're not allowed to do that, and you're limiting what they can do. And I don't know that headgear has any. any proven other than preventing cuts, but then it's opening up the submissions. And then shin guards, those cloth shin guards, I don't know exactly understand why that's making it more dangerous for takedowns and feet getting caught and twisted ankles and things like that. So I look at it from that perspective. I love that you're giving the amateurs minus the elbows on the ground, which I completely agree with. You don't want cuts and scar tissues, but you're giving them the opportunities to compete in the rule set that they're going to as a professional. So now their amateur fights are actually preparing them to be good professionals. And that gets lost in this is we're using the amateur time to develop our skills. And if our record improves really well, our record will outgrow our skill. And now we're going to get tougher fights before we're ready skill wise. And then that can ruin a lot of guys' careers. And that's the one of the challenging things in MMA is boxing does a better job of understanding how to manage a fighter's career and development and not throwing him to the wolves. Like I would fight a I'd fight a clown for a hamburger. I wouldn't fight a bear for a hamburger. You know what I'm saying? It's risk for reward. It's not that I'm afraid of the bear. You know what I mean? But what am I going to get if I win? So that's kind of the challenge. And you're trying to get your guys tough fights so they're getting better because you can't go out there and just fight completely lopsided fights all the time because now your fighter's not getting better and now your fighter's record's outgrowing his skill. And once his record gets too good, he can only fight seasoned, skilled opponents. And now that gap skill wise might be so large that it 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 beats him mentally to where he thinks he's better than he is before he's there. And that can make your process as a coach very, very difficult. Um, it's kind of like the short term versus long term success. Be careful. Short term success feels good, but it doesn't guarantee long term success.
Definitely, man. Now that if people want to find your school, where can they find it at on social media?
So we're reactionmma.com or we're at reaction MMA on Instagram. The We just built a larger facility. It's a little over 12,000 square feet. We have about 6,000 square foot of mat space, a ring, a cage, commercial weights. My goal the last 18 years of owning a school was to bring to Central Kentucky um, a facility as well as coaching quality that would mimic and rival the bigger markets so people could chase the dream that I ultimately started on this. Like when I started in MMA, it was I wanted to fight, and I loved the athletic prowess of it. Um, and it just got to a point to where I was coaching guys so I could get them ready to be my training partners to help me get ready for fights. That I found myself coaching people more and more and more than I was preparing myself. So it was a really tough challenge to prepare both as a competitor and as a coach. And I was doing both of those because I wasn't ready to give up the athletic side. And then there was a gap in between competing for a few years because our team was so active. Fortunately enough, I was able to get back into competing in jiu-jitsu the last 4 or 5 years and had, some success there and was happy with that. Was happy to be able to get back into competing, and there were some of the guys and girls on our team that had never got to see me compete. So for them to be able to see that, it was good because it's hard as coaches for us to tell them about the heyday. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, coach is inflating it. So it was good for them to see me go out and compete and do things like that.
Definitely, man. I definitely appreciate you being on, brother, and appreciate your
Absolutely.
dedication to the MMA too.
Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely, man. We definitely need more people like you here in Kentucky for sure.
Well, I appreciate it. I try. I'm not without mistakes or faults. Sometimes I push people is in the ways to maximize what they can accomplish. And the tough things that come with that are a lot of times people can't separate on and off the mat because off the mat I can't help but to become friends with people. I can't help but to connect and care for people. And so sometimes on the mat, you're trying to remind them that there is a tough, tough fight going to happen. It might not be that day, but it could be at the next competition or whatever. So we have to take every day seriously and we have to prepare. On the days that you're exhausted and tired, I will not forget what you asked me to help you accomplish. And just because you're tired, I can't be your friend in that moment. because what I have to be is your coach, and the coach has to have foresight and longevity in mind when he's coaching. I want to see you be successful and stay successful. Everybody thinks it's about getting to the top or winning a championship. As great as that is, what's worse is not sustaining that success. Um, to have everything you want and then to have it gone, I think is probably psychologically and mentally the toughest thing. And that's why you'll see so many of us MMA guys or martial artists stay in competition past our primes, so to speak, because we're trying to build on that, but we missed our window. And that's why I'm pushing people so so hard, or if you want to say that, because their window for success is extremely short, relatively speaking, to the rest of your life. And I think we don't think about that when we're in it. We think, man, I've got 5 more years of doing this. And you don't realize how short 5 years is. And you don't know, how many guys have we seen? Conor McGregor's a great example, was on top, was killing it, went away. First off, let me preface, he accomplished everything that he wanted to accomplish. He wanted a big bag of money and to be a champion, and he did that over 10 times over. Okay. 2-time champion. Okay. He did those things. Once he accomplished his goals, he didn't know what else to do after that. And then you started to see some of that. And, I try not to get into that. Oh, well, guys tarnish their legacy and all that stuff. I, I really don't try to get into that because I think people who love doing what they're doing, if they like Tito Ortiz and Chuck Liddell and those guys, if they want to keep fighting and BJ Penn, they want to fight till they can't do it anymore. Who am I to tell them to stop doing something they love? Just because maybe they tell the spiral a little bit athletically at the end of their careers, man, if they still love it and it brings them joy and they're doing it for them, as a fan, yeah, it bothers us because we're like, man, we want to keep remembering them like that, how they were when they were in their prime. But sometimes people love something so much they don't know how to not do it. Like most of us that do MMA, we train every day. I train almost as hard now as I did when I was getting ready for fights, and I don't have anything scheduled. Um, it's a part of your lifestyle after a while. It's like you are like most of us don't know how we would be without it. It's like most people get up and brush their teeth every day, or take a shower. For me, coming and training is part of that routine.
Definitely, man. And as people always say, you're not working when you love what you do.
Yeah, and I think I think when you're in MMA, I think it's really visually apparent to you when you look at it. You go, I can either get better or I can get worse, but there is no staying the same. If I wake up tomorrow and I don't do something to help myself be better than I was today, I will have gotten worse. And that's a tough reality to accept because, man, there's days I don't want to. You know, as I get older, I'll be 43 this summer, and it's not the age. I don't feel like 43 is as old. It's the miles. 25 years in jiu-jitsu, and I'm going on 30 some years in boxing, kickboxing, striking stuff. And it's just the miles. And that's not counting, the years playing football and then semi-pro and all those things.
Oh, you played football?
Oh, I loved it. Yeah, man. Yeah, I love playing football.
Where'd you
Yeah.
play football at, brother? If you don't
So I
mind me
played.
asking.
No, not at all. I played at a small school in Berea. I played high school ball at Berea. I will preface we were good this my junior and senior years when we were there, so that's good. Um, Went to college for it. Didn't like the college process. Just a little bit more partying than I wanted. Like I thought, okay, I'm going to go here. People are going to be more serious about it. Um, Again, I'm just one of those people that I recognize at an early time that we have a very short window physically to do the things that we can do. Like for me, like drinking and partying things like that were not something I felt that was conducive to getting where I want to go. Now, when I'm 65, 70 years old, who knows, man? I might shoot. shots every day. Who knows? You know what I mean? Like once I'm that point, because yeah, it's like okay, now we're kind of to the end of this thing. But I wanted to maximize whatever physicality I could and create as many memories as I could to enjoy it. Because really, I mean, ultimately, that's what we have. We have our life experiences and the memories that we create in our youth. I mean, when we're older, we're going to be far limited to what we can do physically. So when you're sitting around because you can't move around, what are you doing? You're thinking. But when I think back, I want to have a bunch of really, really good memories. God willing that He allows me to keep my memories. That's what I want. I want to be able to remember good times and bad.
Yeah, because the bad ones teach you lessons for sure.
Oh, that is the truest thing, as simple as people think that is, it is because when you're young, I know when I was young, bad things. I grew up in a very difficult childhood. Um, but I used to think, I was like, man, why is all these bad things happening? But then as I got older and then I moved into MMA, I realized that those things were happening so I could better reach the people that I needed to be able to reach. Because I can share life experiences with people that are similar to theirs, and those traumas or um, bad events of life, however you want to label them, those things taught me a very valuable lesson to appreciate when times are good, but also in the bad times, be just as appreciative and thankful. I know that sounds a little weird, but like when bad things are happening, then it's not happening to somebody else that I care about. So it's okay if it's happening to me. I would rather that be the case than the other way around. Sometimes I want it to take a break and give me a breather, but you do learn from it. Just like when we lose in fights, I'm telling you, some of the best adjustments we've made as a coach, as a team, or as an individual athlete, or an athlete came from losses. Like I've lost to. I remember learning that I overtrained for fights. I fought Chris Curtis, one of my early pro fights, and I overtrained for that fight. Took it on 3 days' notice because my previous opponent pulled out, but that's where we talk about managing a fighters. I took he had been beaten by a guy, Taylor Ruskin. I beat Taylor and then Chris beat me. But I'd taken that fight on 3 days notice because I was like, okay, well, um, I beat this guy and he beat him, so then I should. And that's not how MMA math works. You know what I mean? That's not how MMA math works. But that was a really great lesson. And all what the crazy thing is, the three of us all trained together for years. Um, on and off. We would run camps. I helped run camps for both of those guys. Um, I coached them through more than a few of their camps, actually.
Yeah, that's cool though, man. Brother, I definitely appreciate you being on, man.
Absolutely. Glad to be on.
Yes, sir, man. Appreciate everybody watching. Everybody have a good night and God bless.